uniqueness.
In this region that used to be ancient Armenia, you have what is the remnants of what archaeologists are discussing and are open about and are labeling the Urartian or Urartu civilization that was there about 3,500 years ago or so. And they were a civilization that built a lot of things in that region, and they were well known for that region. They were an Iron Age civilization. Now, what we're talking about today is these sites like Ianis and 𝗏 and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 are three very important sets of temples that sit around Lake Van, and they are what I believe is the best evidence we have for a civilization that has been previously unknown and not identified, that the Urartians came thousands of years later and built right on top of. And there's a lot of confusion with those two. And we're going to, of course, we can break all of that down. But for those you're asking about Ianis and what is Ianis? Ianis is the most important of those three temples. You could call it the primary, the most holy of all of these three temples. Not only that, but I think that 𝗏 and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 are proxy temples, nodal temples of Ianis. Now, what Ianis is it's a very unusual andesite temple. Andesite is a type of, very hard type of volcanic stone that is built on top of a hill that overlooks the lake. And I believe that it acted as a type of sundial, sun temple, where they have these buttress pillars, 4 of them on each corner, that represent, as the sun moves across the sky, it's going to hit these pillars and create different shadows and angles, but only specifically will when the sun comes down from the west and starts to set. It literally sets right into the inner sanctum of Ianis. That's called the Hlaudi Temple. And within this inner sanctum, you have the first cross, I believe, in history, like the Knights Templar cross that it became later, or the Maltese cross, the Red Cross. These are all later iterations of it. And they have other things like this winged depiction of Hlaudi passing and protecting this cross, with depictions like the sun symbols, like then the hourglass symbol, and all of these, like the griffin symbol, like we see as a protector symbol in the ancient Greek culture, which we can talk about some of the comparisons as we go along. But a lot of these very, very, very sacred, important symbols and motifs that are presented there that are literally laser cut in the andesite. If I was to say, and I've shown this to many archaeologists, I think I've had 3 different archaeologists that have said this statement. I say to them, have you ever seen a temple like Ianis in the world? And they say, honestly, I've never seen anything like it. What's shown at Ianis and the way that it's depicted and cut and designed, it's really stands in its own as a very unique type of megalithic temple. Let me tell you why, Will. Most megalithic temples in the world have shapes, polygonal blocks all fitted together. They're beautiful, but there's nothing carved in them, and there's no symbols usually in them at all. It's just blank. Like, give an example, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Nothing in, no writings and no symbols in that entire pyramid at all. The whole thing is just solid granite and all this, like, mysterious, like we don't have anything left there. Anything that's a depiction of hieroglyphs came from the dynastic Egyptian culture that came later. They would be like, dynastic Egyptians would be just like the Urartians in this case, coming later, finding the remnants of this, sometimes writing into it or building on top of it. But Ianis is very unusual because not only does it have writings in the cuneiform in the entryways that talk about, the grandness of Hlaudi and the grandness of the temple being built, but there are these bizarre symbols that are all carved within the andesite megalithic temple. Now, I mean, say megalith, very important to understand. We're not talking about mud brick or like a limestone. We're talking about incredibly finely cut, massive andesite, and then on the lower walls coming up to the temple, basalt. But they're these hard stones that are cut perfectly, beautifully polished, and then laser cut are these symbols etched into it, okay, like laser cut. And in some cases, Will, it gets even weirder. Some places you have places where the blocks have joined together perfectly, like you can't fit a human hair between them, but the symbols that are cut seamlessly between the 2 blocks.
I got you.
Mind-blowing. If we were to look at masons today, and I've talked to some masons today that have analyzed some of the symbol cuts in like 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏, because there's some down there as well, and have analyzed looking at Lake Van with Ianis, and they tell me today that to cut that, you would have to have laser-like technology, meaning that the more that we look at some of the ways that these are done, the more that it looks impossible it was even done by hand. So if we're looking at the Urartian civilization with their Iron Age tools, or even Bronze Age or Iron Age, doesn't matter what the ages are, it'd be impossible to not only manipulate, but to be able to cut in the type of accuracy and the type of and how perfect these are. It's clearly not Urartian. And that is part of a huge part of the movement of the team that I'm leading around the world, with archaeologists and scientists and experts and a lot of powerful individuals, actually, important people that are part of this, because it's so clear and identified at these sites that it's not Urartian. Because, Will, you can just very clearly see, take a site like Ianis. You have this lower base of this spectacular temple, all these symbols and megaliths, and the floor is actually made out of calcite alabaster. It's absolutely incredible, and so is the altar. It's just the most beautiful temple you've ever gone in. The energy is unreal. Putting your hand on that alabaster altar, I've never felt energy ever like that. It's like you're literally feeling energy surge through your body putting it on that, and I mean that. I can't say that lightly.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is, right above that andesite foundation, you see this huge area of Urartian mud brick. And it's eroded into this, almost decomposed and eroded into what looks like almost like a sand, or like a barely visible with the mud bricks that have eroded into like a dirt. It looks like almost like a soil or a dirt, but it's actually just layers of the Urartian work. And for any of the experts or people that are asking about this, I asked the question, well, if the Urartians could build the very hard andesite and basalt and do that beautiful stone masonry, then why did they never do that again? Why did anything that they ever built again compose of just this simple mud brick type of work, or like a very rough kind of rough stone that you see on some of the wall or outer edges of some of them? And so clearly what we're talking about here is, at Ianis and these other proxy temples, is the base of a much, much more ancient, a temple that is part of a history that we have forgotten, that seems to have the most divine symbols that were woven into some of the most sacred teachings around the world. And all of these other locations, these ancient megalithic temples that have the same symbols, the same depictions carved into them, that are coming from around the world, that are really showing some kind of an origin point, Will, that we're exploring right now.